There is a story about a young child. And this young child heard that the neighbor next door had passed away. This child's family, not thinking that the little boy understood the meaning of those words, were confused, and when he insisted on going next door to be with the family member that was now alone. And the boy was gone for what seemed like a very long time, but eventually he returned home with a smile on his face. When his family asked him what he was doing over at the other house for so long, he simply said this: "First, I helped him cry, and then I helped him smile." His parents were confused, and they said to him, "You helped him cry? How did you do that?" And the little boy said, "I just hugged him." "How did you help him smile?" they asked. And then the boy answered, "I just listened as he told me about some of the places that they had gone and talked about the things that they had seen together. And that made us both smile." The wisdom of a little child. No one taught him how to care. No one told him what someone needs when they have lost a loved one. No one stopped him from doing that which he felt instinctively he needed to do. And I guess the moral here is, first you cry. But we must not miss the second part of this little boy's story, for he said, "Then I helped him smile." And that is what today is all about. And so we have gathered in this beautiful memorial place for a very special reason. For a bright, shining light in your eyes has gone out too soon. We have each come today to honor Paul Edward Johnson, to celebrate his life and to celebrate his gifts, to celebrate his love, and certainly to recognize and dwell within his glorious spirit. We come to bear witness to the loss and the grief that we each feel. And in doing so, we acknowledge that we have holes in our lives because he is no longer here. He is no longer here way before we are ready to say goodbye. It was in a very ancient book written in the second half of the 3rd century BC that we read these words: "To everything there is a season, and a time for every purpose under heaven. A time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up what has been planted, a time to release and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance." So now is the time to mourn, for the heart can only gradually comprehend the loss that we experience, and it can take weeks and months to travel along this journey of grief. But each step that you take, each step can be full of gratitude for Paul's life, as it is also filled with deep sadness for his leaving. Someone wrote these very wise words, and I find them very helpful, and I find them to be very true. "I had my own notion of grief. I thought it was a sad time that followed the death of someone you love, and you had to push through it to get to the other side. But I'm learning that there is no other side. There is no pushing through, but rather there is absorption, adjustment, acceptance. And grief is not something that you complete, but something that you endure. Grief is not a task to finish and move on, but an element of yourself, an alteration of your being, a new way of seeing, a new definition of self. We have each certainly come here today with full hearts, and we have come with numb minds, for there are no words to express the shock and the pain that you are feeling in this time of unbelievable sadness that surrounds you. And the only way to move through such an onslaught of the incomprehensible is to know in this moment that an even bigger halo of support, understanding, and memories is circling your wall of grief, and that this bright halo of light will sustain you and buffer you from being engulfed. Keith Wynne wrote this, and I thought it very appropriate. He wrote, "Teachers cultivate the young minds who are responsible for the future." And then Lily Tomlin, as her character Edith Ann, said this, "I like a teacher who gives you something to take home and think about besides homework." Some of the best lessons that we have learned have certainly come from our teachers. And most often we fail to recognize the shaping of our own futures. Through Paul's passion for learning and his faith in the goodness of humankind, and certainly its possibilities for the future, Paul dedicated himself to planting the seeds of better tomorrows in all of those who had the privilege to have him stand before them in the classroom. It is an important day whenever we stop to acknowledge one who has touched our lives, one who has certainly changed our lives and made an imprint on our hearts. Every life is special, and every life is precious. And every life that we meet has an opportunity to make a significant impact on us. Eleanor Roosevelt had written, "Many people walk in and out of our lives, but only true friends leave footprints on our heart." I believe that beautiful blueprint, those footprints on our heart, stay with us even after they are gone, for those footprints are blessed. Eric Beekner recently wrote something about remembering a loved one, and I think his words of remembrance, how we remember somebody who has truly touched our lives, are so very important to hear at a time such as this. He wrote, "When you remember me, it means that you have carried something of who I am with you, that I have left some mark of who I am on who you are. It means that you can summon me back to your mind, even though countless years and miles may separate us. It means that even after I die, you can still see my face and hear my voice and speak to me in your heart. For as long as you remember me, I am never entirely lost." And so to John and to Scott, I would add this. It is fathers who help give us our roots and give us our wings. They nurture us into the world, and they provide a foundation and then give us the tools to find our own way. They listen to our dreams and wipe our tears and hold us through our fears, reminding us every day that we are loved and that we are cherished. They demonstrate through example their role in making a loving couple and through the security that they give to us. They help us to know that they have our back. And so you can now promise to take the best of what you have inherited from your father, the warmth, the support, the strength, the choices, the loving kindness for others, his sense of humor, and his caring, all of his qualities for living that certainly made him special. These things that have formed you into the special person that you are. The loving family that surrounds you, your beautiful mother Janice, both of you boys, friends and relatives that surround you with their love and their strength and their support. Those are the things that we are to cherish and not take for granted. Those are the things that have great meaning for us as we go through our lives, creating the future that they have imprinted upon our hearts. Paul's cousin, Dorothy Jess, who I understand was always like a sister to him, is unable to be with us today. She is in Chicago, and I believe she is 87, right? She's 87. But she sent the family a very, very beautiful letter. And they have asked me to give voice to this letter in our service today. For she writes, "Dear Jan, John, Scott, and Gloria, with great sadness I am finding it so difficult to accept the passing of our dear Paul. He was such an important part of all of our lives. Even though we lived apart most of our lives, we always had a connection that was ours alone. It was one that was special in so many ways and unique to us. His loss leaves a huge void in my being, as it is also, no doubt, all of you. We were truly privileged to love Paul and have him in our lives. It just never is long enough. Paul's intelligence, wisdom, level-headedness, and hearty sense of humor gave him the ability to relate well with almost everyone. No doubt these were prime attributes which led to his stellar teaching talents. Never boastful, but quite silently, proud of his loving wife and accomplished sons. The look in his eyes gazing upon them said it all. He was a blessed man in so many ways, and he was well aware of it. May the memories and many ways in which Paul touched and guided each of us bring joy, as that is what he would have wished his legacy would be. Paul made this world a more informed, meaningful, and joyful place for us to exist. He accomplished what he was put here for, and he was a contented man. Well done, cousin. Well done. Blessings and my love always, Dorothy.
I am prepared to meet my Maker. Whether my Maker is prepared for the great ordeal of meeting me is another matter. Many of you may know this is a typically pithy, and for this occasion, appropriate quote from Sir Winston Churchill. Out of all the great titans of history, Dad, as many of his friends and family can attest, admired and revered Churchill above all else. Paul Edward Johnson was born to Paul Julius Johnson, a skilled watch and jewelry maker of largely Swedish descent, and Vina Thorburn Johnson, a homemaker of mostly Scottish ancestry. He was born here in Los Angeles on July 12, 1934. Often called Paul E. by relatives and family friends as to avoid confusion with his namesake father, and incidentally a nickname he really hated. Young Paul lived in LA for only a few years before the family moved to Evanston, Illinois, which is an idyllic suburb of Chicago and the city where his parents, my grandparents, had lived. Adjusting to his new home and surroundings, Paul E., from now on I'll call him Father or Dad, our father formed a tight bond with his cousin Dorothy, who Jefferson just eloquently spoke about. And she only lived a block away from him in Evanston. Close in age and without any siblings of his own, Dorothy became like a sister that my dad never had. Together they went ice skating, built elaborate snow forts, played softball in the street, and in the summertime they'd walk to Lake Michigan, a couple blocks away, for a very brisk swim. Our father was a very well-rounded child, got along with nearly everybody, and was respectful of both his peers and elders alike. Personable, polite, smart, and curious, Dad also exhibited a very compassionate heart. There was a younger boy on the street who had severe emotional and intellectual disabilities, and where most of the neighborhood kids shunned or ignored him. My dad became very protective of him and took on the role of a de facto older brother. After 4 happy years in Evanston, Dad and grandparents left the frigid winters and humid summers of Illinois behind and returned to sunny California. Settling into a home in Hollywood, just steps from iconic Melrose Avenue, Dad missed his cousins and friends back in Illinois, but quickly made new ones at nearby Fairfax High School. Upon graduating from high school, Dad attended Chapman University, a respected private institution about 30 miles south of Los Angeles. It was here that our father discovered his intense passion for learning and voraciously read whatever studies-related materials he could get his hands on. Encouraged by a trio of his favorite professors, his zeal was particularly strong in the areas of history, economics, foreign affairs, and philosophy. After completing his 4 years at Chapman, he returned to Los Angeles and attended Occidental College, where he earned a master's degree in education. His love of being taught had manifested in his own desire to teach. Dad's professional career began at Audubon Junior High School, where he largely taught history before eventually becoming a dean of students. It was during his tenure as a dean that a lovely young blonde joined the Audubon faculty as their new English teacher. Instantly smitten by her, my eventual mother, Janice May Sutton, fondly recalls that Dad, way more than necessary, quote, popped by her classroom just to see how she was, quote, settling in. While Dad courted Mom, plying her with steak and lobster dinners and introducing her to the joys of a finely poured martini, he also formed a strong bond with Mom's young son, John. After more than a year of dating, our father did what he had known he would do from day one and asked my mother to marry him. Considered a confirmed bachelor around the faculty lounge, bets were actually placed among his less reputable colleagues regarding whether or not he would actually go through with the wedding. Sometime after, a campus security guard caught sight of my mom and dad in close conversation. The guard later said to my dad in a hushed tone, "Hey, I think that pretty blonde girl might like you." And my dad replied, "I sure hope so. I'm going to marry her in 2 weeks." Soon after their beautiful wedding on April 14th, 1973, which as it turns out, tomorrow will be exactly 48 years ago, Dad and Mom bought a lovely home in the San Fernando Valley. An enthusiastic swimmer, the sizable pool in the backyard was a major selling point for Dad. A little over a year later, their second son, namely me, Scott Paul Johnson, was born. John and I both agree we had an absolutely wonderful childhood with a mother full of patience, intelligence, warmth, and understanding, and a father who is just iconic in our eyes, a pillar of strength and wisdom, someone to aspire to emulate. But Dad was certainly from the old school. He was not particularly demonstrative emotionally. Perhaps it was the Scandinavian in him. However, in his own unique and subtle ways, he demonstrated every single day that he loved us beyond measure and would do anything, absolutely anything for us. And that love eventually extended to my dear sister-in-law, Gloria, who my brother had the very good sense to marry, as well as to her son, Alex. Dad's intense interest in history, current events, and philosophy, as well as the free exchange of differing viewpoints and ideas, wasn't just restrained to his work in the classroom. He routinely had a group of friends over he irreverently dubbed the seminar that would drink scotch and smoke cigars while arguing about politics, foreign affairs, religion, and everything else under the sun. Often accompanied by some rather colorful language as well. Sometimes I would sneak out of bed and sit secretly and silently in the hallway outside of where they were meeting, and I would listen to them giddily bicker until late into the night. Even as a kid, I recognized the immediate deference and great respect the seminar granted my dad whenever he spoke. I was very proud to be his son. And I should add that Mom quickly put the kibosh on the whole smoking cigars in the house thing. They had to go outside to do that. That only lasted the first couple of meetings, and then Mom's like, no. Yeah, Mike Winter with those cigars, man, okay. Our father was a man of resilience and fortitude. As a child, he developed a severe problem with his ankles, and even walking a few blocks would sometimes leave his legs aching. Yet our young father refused to complain. He was eventually diagnosed with what is known as underpronation, a condition in which the entirety of the foot gradually shifts outward from the ankle. This resulted in pain with basically every step. Unfortunately, it was too late to correct the problem, and Dad would live in varying degrees of discomfort for the rest of his life. Doctors anticipated that he would be confined to a wheelchair by his mid-60s, but Dad soldiered on well into his mid-80s with only the use of a cane on occasion. And again, never once did we hear him complain. Despite this unfortunate condition, our father enjoyed life to the fullest. In addition to his love of reading, quoting Churchill, and verbally sparring with his multitude of friends, Dad loved to travel, having been to the majority of the United States, as well as much of Europe, the Middle East, Central America, Mexico, and the Caribbean, among other far-flung locales. He was also a dedicated photographer and captured much of his travels on film. Although Dad could be somewhat reserved at times, he had a very soft spot for dogs, all dogs, and would totally let his guard down when among them. Dad never met a pooch he didn't like, and vice versa. He certainly was the original dog whisperer for sure. Despite his intelligence and sophistication, Dad somewhat paradoxically had a off-color sense of humor. And he laughed heartedly at everything from classic raunchy flicks like Blazing Saddle and Airplane to the more contemporary antics of Charlie Sheen on 2.5 Men, which was always very much to my mom's everlasting chagrin. Slightly embarrassed about his love of that show. He was also a huge sports fan, especially his beloved Dodgers. And we were very glad that he got to see them win the World Series one last time before he passed. Dad retired from teaching at Hollywood High School in 1993, where he had taught for 20 years after leaving Audubon. While at Hollywood High, he was both chairperson of the history department and the student council supervisor, and was greatly loved and admired by both colleagues and his students. Shortly after retirement, Dad created and led a current event discussion group at his local community center for over 25 years. For all that time, the discussion group was one of the most popular at the center and was almost always at maximum capacity. We recently learned that 2 of the longtime members have taken on Dad's mantle and continued the discussion group even during the pandemic, where they discussed the state of the world online. Dad's legacy there lives on. In declining health and with the onset of a severe cough, Dad was rushed to the West Hills Hospital on January 11th, where he was diagnosed with a serious blood clot in his leg, as well as pneumonia. Dad was eventually able to beat back the pneumonia, but it left him in an incredibly weak state. In recovery, he was transferred to nearby Topanga Terrace, a very comfortable rehabilitation center with an extremely kind and attentive staff. However, Dad was never able to regain his strength or fully recuperate. On Friday, March 12th at approximately 12:30 a.m., our beloved father passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 86. Mom, John, Gloria, and I visited often and gave him all our love, support, and encouragement during his final days. On a parting note, our father was a man of firm but quiet faith and conviction. He chose to go to Chapman University partially due to their deep religious affiliation. He also taught Sunday school for several years while teaching at Audubon. As such, we'd like to close with a short passage from the book of Isaiah, a verse which seems appropriate for this occasion. So do not fear, for I am your God. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Polly Johnson was a dedicated husband, father, friend, and a man of great intelligence, integrity, wit, compassion, strength, and humility. We love you deeply, and we miss you dearly. You shall never be forgotten.
I'd first like to say thank you for being here to celebrate the life of this wonderful man who I knew as Dad. My mom started dating Paul when I was just 4 years old. As I got to know him in my early years, I could tell he loved and cared for me very much, just as I did for him. Dad had a passionate interest in baseball, as Scott had mentioned. I remember Dad introducing me to wiffle ball as I was just a young little one, and vividly recall playing it with him and his father in his backyard house in Hollywood. And I was about 4.5, 5 years old back then. One of the most cherished memories is attending my first Dodger game as a family. And also, he taught me how to swim back at the apartment in Fox Hills after they got married. And we enjoyed the pool as at our house in Van Nuys on Outlet as well. And his love, compassion, support, and guidance made me the person I am today. It was because of him that I became a teacher. I actually started out as a business major, but couldn't see myself in that field. And due to my love of sports and enjoyment of mentoring and tutoring young people, Dad thought it would be a good idea for me to pursue a career as a PE teacher. So many years later, with a wonderful career that I enjoy very much, and I'm thankful to Dad for that. And the year, special note, when Dad retired, I began teaching. So Dad left out, and I started with my teaching. And over the years, we would watch sports together, and we would root for the Dodgers and Rams and Bruins, also in the Lakers as well. And in the closing, as Dad progressed in age, I learned to cherish every moment we had together. So, I just want to say, R.I.P. Dad. You are loved deeply by myself and our family. You'll always be in my heart, and you'll never be forgotten. And I'll turn it over to my brother, who's going to read a note from Mom and Dad's dear friend, Susan Drapkin, who is a teacher who started teaching at Hollywood High when Dad was there.
This is again from Susan Drapkin. As a teacher, transferring from an elementary school to a high school is quite an intimidating experience. Back in '81, I came from an elementary school in Watts, Los Angeles, to Hollywood High School. Students were a lot bigger, and teachers were more interested in subject matter rather than the whole person. Hollywood didn't seem to be a friendly place, and I felt that I made a big mistake. It was only when I was assigned to a closet-sized office on campus that my fortunes changed. One morning, a gentleman walked into my class and introduced himself and added a sardonic joke to welcome me. That man was Paul Johnson. At the time, he was department chair of social studies, and even though I was a special ed teacher, he invited me to lunch with the department. During those lunches, I learned that Paul and I had attended the same high school, Fairfax. I was in awe of Paul's intelligence and wide breadth of knowledge he displayed, along with a wicked sense of humor. He was very fast on the uptake, and it was entertaining to hear the banter between Paul and his other colleagues, especially DeRigi, Anderson, Jameson, Patterson, and Takanuchi. Our classrooms were next to each other, and I'd always leave the door open so that I could hear his lectures. I, along with the rest of the students, learned a great deal. He never tried to force his opinions on his students and would always listen to their reasoning and challenge them to think. He had high expectations for his students, but understood the challenges they faced and tried to work with them to succeed. He had a staid exterior, but a soft heart. He was well respected by both students and staff. I was so very glad when he and Jan moved to Agora Hills, where I live nearby. Not only did Paul help me through my transition to secondary teaching, but he introduced me to my very best friend, Jan Johnson. Paul included me in the social studies department, but more importantly into his family. Whenever Jan and I went on our adventures, I always got my Paul fix by spending 10-15 minutes discussing current events before departing. His quick ability to turn a word into a humorous pun always left me laughing. Here he comes again. Paul was a great admirer of Winston Churchill. And here are just 3 quotes that reflect on Paul, as said by Churchill. Number 1, quote, "My most brilliant achievement was my ability to persuade my wife to marry me." Number 2, quote, study history. In history lies all the secrets of statecraft." And number 3, quote, "I may be drunk, miss, but in the morning I will be sober, and you will still be ugly." Thank you, Paul. You are a true gentleman, and I am so thankful for all that you added to my life. Briefly, before I have Jefferson come up to finish things off, I just wanted to acknowledge the many friends and family who couldn't make it today because of the pandemic, because of long distance, because of health reasons, etc. And I especially want to reach out to my mom's dear sisters, our beloved Aunt Anne and Aunt Shelley, as well as their husbands, our fantastic Uncle Don and Ken. And also, of course, Dorothy, who's back in Illinois and wanted to come, but it was a little bit too much.
There was, many, many years ago, a very lost young man. And he wrote some words that have helped many people in a time of despair and confusion and solitude. As David wrote these words, he was separated from all of those whom he loved and the people who loved him. And it was very easy to lapse into a place of fear. But David didn't do that, for he realized there was something bigger than even himself, and bigger than anything that he would ever face. So instead of allowing his difficult circumstances to define him, he wrote these words, which I bet are very familiar to many of you. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me to still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. As we look around the green landscaping around us, we see that there are many names that are carved into the stone. And these names represent lives that are important to others, just as Paul's life is so important to you. Sometimes it seems we're not given enough time to make the impressions on others that we would wish to make. And other times it seems we live longer than our bodies or our minds could really endure. But it is in this beautiful sacred place that all are equal. Young and old, rich and poor, those who became famous, and those who perhaps were known to just a small group of loving friends and family. And so it is today, under what's trying to be very beautiful blue skies, we place Paul's body in this hallowed space. And in so doing this, we dedicate this space to every beautiful and every precious memory that is associated with Paul. It's an age-old ritual that we perform here, and yet it is a singular experience. For Paul meant so very much to each and every one of you gathered here. We join the universality of death with the uniqueness of human life in this simple ceremony of farewell. Paul is laid to rest today near his in-laws, Roy and Verona Sutton. And his parents are buried at Forest Lawn in Glendale, not so very far from this place. It has been said that to live in hearts that love is to not die. And so in dedicating this space to Paul and to his memory and to his love for you, we do so with remembrance of the fullness of the love and life that he has given to each of you. His spirit is now in that beautiful place where there is no pain, there is no sorrow, there is no fear, but there is unconditional love, grace, comfort, and perfect peace. This solemn place will forever be a place of refuge for you in times when your sorrow can just seem to become overwhelming. It is a place for you to come, to sit here, and to pray if you wish to do that, and to remember him, and to speak to him in the language of your heart. For indeed he has wisdom to share from a heart full of love for each and every one of you. He made his imprint on you. You made your imprint on him. So as you come here and sit and find comfort and peace within your own hearts, as you go through life holding dearly all the lessons that he has taught you, cherish those, for they are a sacred gift that he has poured forth to you from the deep love in his heart. It was Mahatma Gandhi who said, "There are no goodbyes for us. Wherever you are, you will always be in my heart." And so as we leave this place today, we leave in thanksgiving, not regret. For Paul's life was so very full while he was among us. Touched though we have each been with sadness, as we consider Paul's life, we are filled with memories. Some happy and some sad. Some cause that tear to fall across our cheek. And some cause our face to break out in a smile. That Paul lived and what Paul has experienced can never be taken away from him or from any of you. For this, we are grateful. Remember always those words of Isaiah. So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Let us close with a blessing. Gracious Creator, God, our thoughts continue this day to be with Paul's wife, Janice, and sons, John and Scott, and with Gloria this day. And as we go forward with a small flickering of light in our soul, we know that that light is Paul, reaching out to us. May the memories of Paul begin to bring comfort rather than pain, and may the words, the touch, and the presence of others bring solace. And may you be blessed in your coming in and your going out, grateful for a life lived and a beautiful legacy left behind. So go from this place in peace and take care of one another, as Paul would wish you to do. God bless you.